Okay, we'll move into the faith section. And again, let me talk about this. And then you tell me what you hear out of this and how you relate to what I'm saying. What page is that on?
55. Oh, well, 56.
56? Okay. Page 56. When we look in the New Testament, we see even there people who are afraid of God. And you have to ask yourself, why would someone be afraid of God? Peter's in the boat. Jesus tells them where they can catch the fish. They catch all the fish, and everyone in the boat wants to know Jesus except for Peter. He says, "Depart from me because I'm a wicked and sinful man." Moses goes on the mountain and he speaks to God face to face, and when he comes back, the people say to him, "You talk to us, but don't let God speak to us." Why are people afraid of God? And so many people are afraid of Him. In fact, they're so fearful of God that in our culture and society now, we're not even supposed to mention the name of God. It's just that frightening if you say God. What would you be doing talking about God? Well, there's not such a thing as an intellectual atheist, because someone who's intellectually honest has to admit there's something greater than themselves. And so what we have instead are people who are emotional atheists. They're unbelieving in their emotions. And we've looked at the soul and said you have mind, will, and emotions. Do you judge your thoughts? Do you judge your emotions? It's easy to judge your thoughts. You're standing at the bridge and you have a thought to jump off. But what about judging your emotions? And in fact, people's intellectual arguments about God are always rooted in emotion. How do they really feel about Him? Now, we have counselors and psychologists that will tell you you can't talk to people on the basis of how they feel, because feeling isn't reality. Well, it may not be, but it's what you live out of, isn't it? So you might as well talk about it. If I feel that way, that's how I feel. And so I need to talk about how you feel. With our emotions, many people are running from God, and yet with their mind, they're acknowledging God. And that causes them to be torn in two. And so they're treating God like this. With mind, I see that He's there, but with emotions, I'm afraid of Him. And what we've done so often is to try to persuade the mind to let go, when it's not the mind that needs to let go and let God. It's the emotions that need to let go and to let God. So I want to take a moment and look at your emotional concept of God. How do you feel about God? Has anyone ever asked you about God? So, when it comes to God, some people run to God with their minds, but they're running away with their emotions. I know your mental concept of God, but I need to find out what your emotional concept of God is. Because our behavior is actually rooted in how we feel. And if I keep giving you intellectual understanding, but I haven't given you any emotional understanding about where you're at, you'll just be torn all the time. And you'll be half converted, because you can give God part of you, but not all of you. You won't be able to turn anything over to Him at all. So we want to look at how you feel about God, and then find out that that's the foundation for how you act. Okay. What do you hear in that? Just write down one sentence. Okay, some of you are finished. Have a go at it. Yeah.
Our foundation of how we relate to God is based on our emotional response about what we feel about Him.
Yep. Good. All we're trying to do in this one diagram is say, have you ever thought about your emotional concept of God versus your mental concept of God? This is even applicable in Africa, in Tibet, in some remote area, because you'll see someone in the village and they see that there's God around them and the things that are around them, but they won't give themselves. In Africa, we were there, Homer's been there with me, at a Bible school, and we finished the lectures, and I said I wanted to counsel every student that was graduating. They'd been 4 years at the Bible school. They were all graduating as pastors. The head of the school sat with me to do the interpreting, and all but one of the the students graduating had been to a witch doctor that year. All but one of them. You should have seen the director there when he's sitting in and interpreting this, and he's poured 4 years of his life into these guys, and they've all been to a witch doctor. And then we got to the root of why they were fearful of God. And so with your mind, you run to God. With your emotions, you run away from God. I think all of you have probably had this happen, where somebody else has related how terrible you are and what a terrible person you are and how mean and rude you are and hard-headed or whatever. And so you meet the people and they don't even want to talk to you. And when they find out you're not as bad as they thought you were, they don't know what to do. It's like a big reversal in their head. Like, you're supposed to be a terrible person. Why are you so happy? Why do you enjoy talking to me? Why is that? And they have this built up in their minds. Well, we have this built up in our emotions. And it does rule over what we're doing. And I'm not saying that intellect isn't important. I'm saying if you don't deal with the whole man, and we say this about counselors, that if you never deal with the spirit of man, you never dealt with the man. And so if you can't acknowledge spirit, soul, and body of a man, then you will never ever deal with the man. And in psychology, they never deal with the man. In the same way, I've never dealt with your belief system or your soul if I don't acknowledge there's mind and emotions in it. And if you look at our Bible schools, the whole thing is geared to this side. And if you look at the Sunday school programs, it's all geared to this side. If you look at apologetics, it's all geared to this side. But I'm saying, I really believe after a lot of years in this, it's rooted over here. And it's not the people, I mean, Paul's teaching too. He's telling them this is the real God, the unknown God. So you do appeal over here. But where we're at right now, and we want to move into God after we've been looking at the practical, we have to say what's going on over here. So in these emotions, or in my being, we're going to talk about God. But as I mention God, I realize this in you, that for many people, with their mind they can run to Him, but with their emotions they run away. That they fear God and they give Him one of these. Has anyone ever talked to you about your emotional concept of God? How you feel about God? I'm going to give you a little test that'll tell me about your emotional concept of God. And I want you to answer this test not on the basis of what you think, but how you feel. So imagine this, at your very worst moment, you're laying in bed, you're depressed, the whole world's caving in, and I appear at the side of your bed and I start asking these questions. How would you answer these questions? Now, you have to make this clear when you're talking to believers. I'm not saying you would answer it this way all the time, because they don't want to say anything negative about God, which reveals their emotional concept of God, because if I say anything negative, you may get me. So I don't want to go there. I don't want to say something negative about it. No, I'm not saying you live that way all the time. I'm saying at your worst moment. But when does Satan attack you? At your best or your worst? Yeah, so he attacks you at your worst. So could I please find out how you feel at your worst? Now, you've got to help the crowd a little bit, because you start here and you say, when I think about being with God, I feel. What comes into your head? Love. Always love. And I say, yes, I know that, and I know that's what you know. At your very worst moment, do you feel loved? Now, this is the easiest lecture you can give in all of them. It's the most straightforward. You follow the diagrams the most. It's really, really an easy one. And it's the best place to start, if you want to start with lectures, is with this one, because it's really, really straightforward. You have an emotional concept of God, a mental concept of God. Have you ever looked at your emotional concept? Could we take a minute and do that? I want to give you this test and tell me how you would answer this at your very worst. Now, as you go through here, what are the common things that you think you would hear? Again, remember our audience. The people that have it all together are rarely there. Remember the people that you're sharing with and that you're counseling and discipling. If they had it all together, they wouldn't be there. So, what are the things you think you would hear? And as you're lecturing this, here's all I want you to do is to stand here and say, when I think about being with God, I feel. Okay, confused?
He's not there.
Not there's a big one. I'm asking you to try to hit the audience at 70%. That's all. I mean, you won't get it all, but that. When I have to trust God, I feel. What's that? Desperate. Yeah. Yeah, desperate. When I think about God, I wish. Now just think, put that person in front of your face that you see at the church that's always depressed, stressed, undone. Just put it, you know who they are, you know who I'm talking about. Put them in front of your face. How are they going to answer this? When I think about God, I wish.
I wish he would listen. He would help me.
Yeah. Okay, doesn't listen. Sometimes I get angry with God when?
He's not there.
Okay. It frustrates me when God wants me to. Okay. See, now all those are good. Wait. Be perfect. Act in a way I don't want to. I really enjoy God when. Yeah, well, if people are honest, that'd be right. You know. The one thing I would change about myself to please God is.
Everything. That's what the one girl said.
That's what they usually do.
Okay. And then you got, of course, you'll have that individual sin somebody's going to have. When I think about God's commands, I feel
Helpless.
helpless. What else?
Overwhelmed.
What's that? Huh? Helpless. I've given this test thousands of times. You're right on track with what you'll hear in Africa or anywhere. You hear the same stuff. Sometimes I wish God would. Yeah, kill me. You know what's funny is that I'll try to give this test to an atheist, and they'll go, but I don't believe in God, so how do I answer that? How do I answer any of these? I can't answer these because I don't believe in Him. I go, that's okay. Let me read the questions, and you see how you go with it. Yeah, but I don't believe, so there's no way to answer it. I said, I know, just let me read them. By the end of this, they're singing like a canary. Giving you all of these things. I can really depend on God what? When? Never. Anything else? Amy?
When he feels like it.
Okay. Yeah, because it's one way. It's one way. Yeah. So you got a one-way relationship there. Okay, so just a one way and he feels. That's good. In my relationship with God, I'm always sure that He will. Do you know Satan's done a good job giving us an emotional concept of God, hasn't he? And there you are teaching and never knew this was underneath the surface. That you're trying to drive someone to Christ and the whole world is driving them to Him. And this is the biggest obstacle of getting there. The one thing that frightens me about God is okay, judge. What's that? Yeah. That's right. Kill the kids. He's like Collie. God surprises me when? Okay. Anything else?
Like when he actually cares.
Yeah.
I don't know. That always surprises me.
Yeah.
That's not really an answer. I don't know. That's for me.
No, but I think
I'm
that's.
always surprised that he actually knows.
People are surprised when He takes notice. Is the way I say that.
That's it. Yeah, it takes notice.
Because again, you got to be a prayer warrior, Amy.
Yeah.
You got to just beat the gate, and then finally they'll take notice just because you're annoying. The one thing I'm afraid God will do is, yeah, He sure likes killing people. He's going to kill someone I love. Now, this little diagram is almost your transitional statement from one to the next. This is your transition. And so it's pretty straightforward. We go back to this. I want to talk to you about God, but first of all, let me say this. Everyone runs to God with their mind and away with their emotions. And so it causes you to be torn in two. And so I can understand why you don't want to, why you may not be interested in me talking about Him. And it's always interesting when you tell people, I got good news for you, Jesus can help you. And they go, well, what are you going to do? They got more hope in you than they do in Him. They don't want to hear that He'll do it all. Well, you have an emotional concept of God. That's all we're saying here. Have you ever thought about it? I've got a little test I'd like you to take. And would you answer it how you would answer it at your very worst moment? What would you say then? And these are some of the common answers I get in the lectures. Just read through it and do exactly what I just did with you. So all you got to do is just read it and let people answer it. It's very, very simple. Now, let's see how this works out. What are the needs that you have? At this point, what are the needs that you have in your life? And you've been talking about different needs that you have. And you have the need to be loved. That's come up. And acceptance. And you want assurance for the future. Security. You'd like some commitment from someone. I believe God can meet those needs, but here's our problem. Here's how you feel about God. And then you list everything we just said. He's there, but He's not there. He doesn't help. You have to go to Him. He'll never take notice of you. And we go through the list of what it is. Now, would you look to this God to meet those needs? So now we're driven back to idols again, because at least the idol, I know what it'll produce, even if it'll produce misery. I know what it'll give me temporarily, even though it won't meet the deepest need, and it'll leave me with symptoms. I'll look to other people. I'll ask them to help. But I'm not going to go to God. Who does this describe then?
Your Father.
Yeah. What will people say? Generally, in the lecture, what are they going to say? When you ask, who does this describe? He's not there. He doesn't help. He doesn't care. He's going to kill one of your kids. He doesn't listen to you. He shows partiality. He's there but not there. Who are they going to tell me that is? Yeah, it's amazing. It's always Satan. And then if it's not Satan, there's one other person they'll say it is. Well, they'll just say it's me.
Yeah.
I'm surprised at how many times that comes up, that it's Satan or me. Rarely have I ever had anyone say it was their father. But that's who it is. I mean, Amy's right on. That's who it is. And so then I'll just cross this out and say you really described your earthly father because at age 7 you had a fixed concept of authority and you transferred it to heaven. Now, we just go back through the list and ask this question. Was your dad there? Did he help? Was he easy to please? If you had to do what he told you, was it something that made you happy or was it a burden? Did he ever take anything away from you? Was he ever critical of you? And you go right down through the list. And it will describe them perfectly. If you want to reject God, it's your business. But please know who you're rejecting. So know who it is you do reject. And I don't blame you that if this is what God is, I want to stay away from Him. And now I understand why with your emotions you pull away and with your mind you may pull forward. And you'll be torn apart. You feel this about God. Who is God? 1 John 4:8, He's love. 1 Corinthians 13 describes love. So let's go back there and turn to our Bibles and just read that. He's patient, He's kind, He bears with you, He believes in you, He hopes in you, He endures, and He never fails. This is who God is. would you be willing to let this God meet these needs? If you wait for lying emotions, because we've already established that you have lying emotions, because you're born dead to God in the Spirit, self-centered and insane. Insanity is your mind and emotions in touch with reality. You're not in touch with reality, so you have lying emotions. If you wait for lying emotions to agree with the fact, because this is who God is, how long will you wait? Now, here's where our whole conference falls to pieces. If I didn't have this one word, I'd be going well. I could function in the secular realm. But this word's going to keep popping up, and when this word pops up, it takes you out of the secular into the spiritual. And so we can go practical, spiritual, practical, spiritual. I have secular counselors that try to buy our material, and when they can't buy it, they steal it. And they go ahead and use it because they don't have any models that work, and they know that this basic model will do something, and they see the practical side of it, but they'll never really use it properly because they have to leave the spiritual out. And this word messes up everything. And that word, the only way you can turn lying emotions into fact, because up to now I just gave you information. I think it was pretty good information. Because for the first time in your life, I told you you've been divided between what you know and what you feel. And I've given you a test that shows you that that's why you feel. And now I see where you can really go get your needs met as God. But I got to throw in this one word. And this one word changes everything. The only way lying emotions become fact and this whole system moves from my head to my heart is that I have to, at this point, use the word faith. Because that's the only way it'll work. That takes it completely out of the realm of the secular and completely out of the realm of understanding. You would have to believe. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? You would have to believe that this is what God is before you'll ever experience that's what God is. And the way I'm going to find out that he's all of these things is that in the midst of my failure and defeat and problems, I stop and listen, and I'll hear him say, I love you. But I have to begin to move in it. At some point, you move against your lying emotions. And that takes faith to do it because they're lying and you don't feel the facts yet. Now, at this point, when you present this to people, you're stuck and you're done unless they move in faith. The one thing I want you to see about these lectures is that if anybody listens to them and anyone's life is changed, it's not because you're a good lecturer. And if it's not changed, it's not because you're a poor one. It's because they chose in an act of faith to move on it. I just don't take any credit for my counseling. Because think of it, in your life and in my life, when I've made a choice, I'm the one that's made it. I had to go against lying emotions. I had to fight them. I had to say no to them. I had to say yes to him. It was my work. You never did it for me. I don't care what you shared with me. And so at that point, we realize what we can do, and all we can do is witness to where God's working. So I use the example of a metal detector. You run it over the sand, and it doesn't create gold, it reveals gold. We don't create hearts, we reveal hearts. The purpose of discipling isn't to change people, but to witness to a change that's in them, and they have to move in the area of faith. So it's got to be faith that does it in them. So, take a sentence, and what does this tell you? Let me go through it one more time. Just quickly, and I'll come right up to that diagram. I want to talk to you about spiritual things, but I understand with your mind you run to God, and with your emotions you run away. I want to deal with how you feel emotionally. Would you take this test for me? And we'll look at how you feel about God at your very worst moment. And I know you don't do this all the time, but at your worst, how would you answer this? Do you know you've got spiritual needs, and if God is everything you just described, you'll never look to him? It really isn't God. Who it is you just described your father, your earthly authority. And now that's locked into your emotions. And they're lying emotions because God is 1 Corinthians 13. If you wait for lying emotions to agree with the fact, how long will you wait? Your whole lifetime. So now I got to bring in a word, faith. You have to begin to act and to move as though God is all of these things. And then you'll begin to experience it, but not until you move on it. So we go back to our illustration. The bear's chasing the fellow, and he runs and runs and runs and gets in the cabin just in time. The bear hits the door, falls back, hits the door, falls back. Even though he's safe, he doesn't feel it. Now, if he stays in there, he'll rot if he keeps listening to his emotions. At some point, he has to act and say, no, I think I'm safe and I'm going to leave. All right, in one sentence, 2 sentences, tell me what that diagram means. Keith?
I put what I really feel about God at my worst is not going to encourage me to run to Him to fill my needs, but make me rely on my own resources or idols. I need to take what God is on faith and let Him be it in my experience.
Okay. And Keith went back to the last lecture on idols and brought it back in. In this lecture, you're looking at how, all we said in the beginning is you have one way you think, and now we're going to move over here to how you feel. Gave you a test, you have false feelings, they came from authorities in your life. That's why you're running. And so we're going through that. We were born dead to God. We look to others to fill the gap, and it's my fault for looking there. I mean, it's really nice just to blame somebody else for my concept of God, but the fact is, I was looking to somebody who couldn't meet the need anyway. And it's all part of, in the plan of God, in this world, in the room you enter, that you don't have the perfect concept of God because He only teaches you in contrast. And so if you're never in a world without that was absent from love, that was never absent from love, why would love mean anything to you? And so, again, we're looking at those contrasts and broadening our concept of God, that He's working all things together for good. I watched them do this in Russia, and I told some of you, playing multi-leveled chess. It's on 4 levels. And so all you have is you have the knight, or the king here, the queen here, the pawns and the knights down here. And you call out your moves on these different levels, and you can't see them and they can't because the table's down here.
Oh my gosh.
So you move them, and then you keep calling out, and then finally you say checkmate, and all you have up here is the king,
Oh my God.
and you say checkmate. Then they lift off the levels, and and all the plays are memorized, and you have to have all the pieces taken off and put in the right place. Multi-leveled chess. Now you have to have an IQ, the temperature of the sun, just to think about that. You're just a human computer going through that thing. And it's amazing that all of a sudden, there's nothing on the board, but it says checkmate. In this world, God is playing on a chessboard that's 6 billion deep. That's how many people there are. And He's moving them and moving things, and everything's moving. And then all of a sudden He goes, checkmate. And you go, huh? Because everything's come together to checkmate. He's using everything around me. Even my false concept of God He's used. Because what it's done, in a false concept of God, my idols looked better. I went to my idols. I trusted the idols. And now by choice, I want to find out who God really is. And so He's working it all together. All things work together for good, everything. It's all coming together. So, and one of the things, we're not blaming anybody. That doesn't do any good at all. That doesn't get us anywhere. Do you see where this is an easy lecture? It's one of the easier ones. Because I have a mental concept and emotional concept of God. Most people are torn between. With their mind, they run. With their emotions, they run away. I want to give you a little emotional test and find out where you're at. Now we know where you're at. You've got needs, but your God is distorted, and you won't look to Him to meet the needs. He's really 1 Corinthians 13, and that God you could run to, but all your lying emotions tell you He's this, but the fact is He's 1 Corinthians 13. Now let me tell you one thing that's going to help you in this. It's if you understand what faith is. Yeah. Now, what you have there in your notebook are all the different concepts of God that people can have. So you can run through those. They're pretty obvious. Those are feelings that you would have with that concept of God. Yeah, 72. Okay, so on page 72. Okay, listen to me on this one. And just tell me what you hear. It's not too difficult, what we're saying. If you believe faith is an action on your part, you'll go nuts. And so when we sit there and I say, you have to change lying emotions to the fact by faith, and now it's an action you have to do, how do you do it? Faith is not creating anything, it's receiving something. It's not you making God out to be love and patient and kind and bearing with you and believing with you and you straining through that. Instead, it's receiving from God that He's love and He's patient and He's kind and He bears with you. See the difference? So the example we would use is to say this. Faith is like the eyes and the ears of your body. Your ears are created to receive sound, not to generate it. If it generates sound, you're going to go crazy. Your eyes are created to receive light, not to create light. If your eye decides to whip up a little light at 3 in the morning, you're going to go crazy. So whenever an eye is creating or an ear is creating, you go crazy. That's not why they're made. They're created to receive. Faith is the eyes and the ears of my spirit. And it never creates because it can't. It would put you back in the garden and be encouraging you to play God because Adam and Eve wanted to be like God and be a creator and not a receiver. And so what we're saying instead is, no, faith receives the things of God. It doesn't create the things of God. You don't have to leave here and make God to be love. And if you hear most of the faith teaching, they don't have any faith because they're making God something through their faith. I just want to receive what God's doing. The greatness of your faith isn't in how much you receive, but how long you can wait and receive nothing. Because faith is a receiving thing. The greatness of your faith is not in what you create. In Italy, they were upset with me when I talked about this and said, yeah, brother, well, later on they got me in a corner, well, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it'll move. And I looked at them and said, well, how many of you moved? Well, they go, no, it's personal mountains you got to move. And I said, no, it's not personal mountains, it's a mountain. How many of you have ever moved a mountain? And the fellow finally says, well, I haven't. And I said, well, get your faith right and then come back. Well, that's not what it is. Again, when Jesus is speaking in the Gospels in the transition, He's looking at you and saying, if you really want to play God and you say you have faith, you would say to a mountain, move, and it would move. And I have faith, and I could say it. No man's ever moved a mountain. He's not trying to say that I ought to go out and move mountains around here and that proves that I have faith, because that's me generating. That's not what He's saying. If God told me to move it, I would receive it from Him and it would go this way and it would move. So it's not me generating, it's me receiving. I don't mind you praying for healing, but the thing is, it has to be a healing received, not a healing generated. Because 85% of people who are healed at a healing meeting are not healed 3 months later. Because they had faith in faith, they had faith in the speaker, they had faith in all this, and they created it. When they were making the hair growth drug Rogaine, they gave 100 men who were completely bald sugar tablets, and 12% grew a full head of hair.
Oh my gosh.
Well, everyone has faith, and you can have faith in a sugar tablet and grow hair. It's called the placebo factor, and in scientists it drives them crazy. But it's faith in a pill. Everyone has faith, but what do you put your faith in? Faith in money, faith in faith, faith in prosperity, faith in this, faith. No, we have our faith in Him, and our faith receives, it doesn't generate. Faith can generate, but it'll be temporary. It'll never last. And so what we're saying here in this diagram again is that I'm going to help you with faith. Faith doesn't create a work of God. It receives it. Faith is like the eyes and the ears. They don't create sound. They receive it. They don't create light. They receive it. Faith is the eyes and ears of your spirit. It receives the thing of God. I don't want you to go out here and by faith make Him love. Would you just by faith receive love? And when you fail, say thank you for being my love. You come tonight as my love.